Ukrainians waking up to the sound of explosions in the capital, Kyiv, after the Russian president orders a military operation. Changes to COVID-19 safe management measures put on hold as Singapore sees surge in daily cases. And a journey to the West, food correspondent Eunice Quek recommends the best eats in the western part of Singapore. Good evening, you're watching The Big Story with me, Hairianto Diman. Subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you will not miss a single episode. We begin with new images from Ukraine's capital city, Kyiv, showing residents trying to get out of the city. Traffic has been building up in one direction on the roads, with cars heading away from the city. Inbound traffic, though, looks much smoother in the other lanes. Since Russian President Vladimir Putin announced a military operation in Ukraine, air raid sirens and loud explosions could be heard shortly in the distance. Elsewhere in the city, some concerned residents are taking shelter in subway stations, unsure of what else to do. Their worry is a Russian invasion might mean that the capital will be a prime military target. And in a sign of the escalating situation, pictures are emerging of what appears to be remnants of a missile that landed in this street in Kyiv. It's unclear who fired the missile and where from. And this is the view right now of Maidan Square in the center of Kyiv. Reporters there are saying there's huge sense of shock among residents, and few people are out on the streets today. In a televised address on Russian state TV this morning to announce a special military operation in Ukraine, Russian President Vladimir Putin denounced what he called a genocide orchestrated by Ukraine in the country's east, as well as NATO's aggressive policy towards Russia. Mr. Putin adding that if there is any foreign interference, Russia will react immediately. US President Joe Biden leading world leaders in condemning Russia's attack on Ukraine. Mr. Biden tweeting that he spoke with his Ukrainian counterpart and will be holding a meeting later on Thursday with a group of 7 leaders. He'll also announce additional sanctions against Russia in response to its latest military action. Now here's Ukraine's president in a speech to his people.
Сполучені Штати Америки вже почали гуртувати міжнародну підтримку. Сьогодні від вас, від кожного з вас потрібно спокій. По можливості залишайтесь, будь ласка, вдома. Ми працюємо. Армія працює. Працює весь сектор безпеки і оборони України. На зв'язку з вами буду постійно я, РНБО, Кабінет міністрів України. Незабаром я знов вийду на зв'язок. Без паніки, ми сильні, ми готові до всього, ми всіх переможемо, бо ми – це Україна. Слава Україні!
Joining me now with more is US Bureau Chief Nirmal Ghosh, who's currently in Singapore. Nirmal, Mr. Biden has been warning about this crisis for some time, and he now plans to speak with his G7 counterparts. What do you think could come out of these meetings?
Yes, what we can expect is a wide range of tougher sanctions as Europe faces the reality that Vladimir Putin has factored in the expected response and yet gone ahead with invading Ukraine, clearly with the aim of removing the current government of Volodymyr Zelensky and turning Ukraine into a pro-Russia buffer state. And what is clear from the Russian president's most recent statements, furthermore, is that he wants to restore the old glory of the Soviet Union's empire, which fragmented back in 1991. So what they can and most likely will do is expand the sanctions. We've heard the Europeans in the last few hours saying they will pull out the stops, and they could do a lot of damage, especially if they really target the oligarchs and cronies who have a lot of assets in the West. Washington has already imposed sanctions on the firm building the $11 billion Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline, which supplies Germany with natural gas from Russia. On Tuesday, Germany froze approvals for that pipeline, which has been built but is not yet operating. And now it is possible the project will be permanently scrapped to avert dependence on Russian energy supplies. We will also likely see sanctions against more Russian banks, bans on American and European financial institutions from processing transactions with Russian banks, export controls on American goods, and so forth. Now, the key thing to watch is if they hit Vladimir Putin's cronies hard, because that could sow disaffection with Putin. That is really the only thing the West can do to try and impose damages so Putin's allies and cronies will question whether he has gone too far. There is plenty they can do in this regard if they really decide to, and given the fact that they are worried about Europe's security balance, that this is an invasion by nuclear power, which is a big shock to the system, this is a test of how far they will go to inflict real economic damage. Because in many cases, cutting Russia off from the global financial system means Western nations with investments and assets in Russia may also suffer. But all this is related to how they perceive the Russian threat, not just to Ukraine, but beyond.
Nirmal, Mr. Putin has said that Russia will react immediately to any foreign interference. So apart from economic sanctions, like you mentioned earlier on, what can US and its allies do against Russia that doesn't result in the consequences falling squarely on Ukraine?
It is difficult to put NATO or US troops on the ground in Ukraine. The US has already ruled out boots on the ground because Ukraine is not a member of NATO. It is difficult to launch military strikes to deter Russia because Putin has said he will retaliate. And that would raise the level of threat significantly, given that we are talking about nuclear powers here. Earlier this month, US President Joe Biden, in an interview, said when Americans and Russians start shooting at each other, that is a world war. And on Tuesday, the president, when he laid out the first tranche of sanctions, very specifically said these are defensive. And he said, quote, "We have no intention of fighting Russia," unquote. Now, why did he say this? Principally because domestically, polls have shown for some years now that the American public does not want the United States to get involved in a shooting war in Europe or anywhere over a country which many Americans would be hard put to find on a map. And Russia, of course, knows this. So apart from sanctions, what the Western powers can do is intensify what they have already been doing, which is military assistance to the Zelensky government. This can be ramped up. They can impose blockades on Russian shipping, for example. But frankly, it is hard to see them being able to do anything else for fear of military escalation going out of hand. At best, they can stall the Russian advance and then negotiate.
Well, thank you so much, Nirmal, for your inputs. Nirmal Ghosh there, the Straits Times US Bureau Chief. In the financial markets, investors are rushing to safety, pushing down stocks and lifting the prices of commodities. For the first time in more than 7 years, a barrel of oil now costs more than $100. Singapore's stock market hasn't been spared either. The main Straits Times index closing down 3.49%. Every single one of the 30 constituents in the index falling today amid the crisis in Eastern Europe. The changes to existing COVID-19 safe management measures will be implemented at a later date, which will be announced shortly. These were scheduled to take effect in 2 phases, tomorrow and on March 4th. And places like our Tampines hub here were already preparing to do away with some safe distancing measures that won't be necessary in mask-on settings. Announced by the task force last week, other changes would have entailed allowing groups of 5 to visit homes at any one time, as well as the lifting of size limits for some events. But MOH today says, quote, "Given the current surge in daily cases and the extensive work involved in going through the detailed rules across different settings, the MTF has reviewed the matter and has decided to consolidate and streamline the SMMs in one go instead." About 110 public health preparedness clinics have answered the call to extend their operating hours for 2 weeks. And doctors at some of these clinics are hiring people and getting staff to perform additional shifts. This comes as the Health Ministry announced this week that selected PHPCs will operate up to 11 p.m. on all nights, as well as from 2 to 5 p.m. on weekend afternoons. I'm now joined by family physician Dr. Ellie Sabrina. She's the director of Banyan Clinic in Woodlands. Welcome to the show, Doctor. Doctor, is your clinic these days seeing more patients with respiratory symptoms?
Oh, definitely. We are seeing at least double the numbers before the Omicron surge, especially after the Chinese New Year period.
And how has that affected the operations for your clinic?
Of course, we are a neighborhood clinic. The problem when there is a sudden surge in the number of upper respiratory cases, we have a problem of managing the triaging of both the acute patients with acute symptoms and those who come to the clinic for chronic conditions. Because I think, as everyone know, for those family clinics in the HDB estate, we do not have much of a space, so it's pretty difficult to separate both groups. And that creates a lot of stress on my staff. And secondly, because so many people are getting infected with the Omicron variant, nurses and doctors are human too. There is an increase in absenteeism rate, and we have to deal with the manpower shortage.
And Doctor, it's been reported the majority of the recent COVID-19 cases, they have mild symptoms. Help us understand what is considered mild symptoms.
Okay, when we are talking about mild symptoms, we are talking about symptoms that probably would not require any urgent treatment or hospitalization. So usually we triage the people according to the risk factors and also with the symptoms. So if, say, for example, you're just having some fever, a bit of cough, a bit of sniffle, body ache, these are mild, especially if you are young and fully vaccinated, because evidence have shown that most of us will recover quite uneventfully. But if you belong to the high-risk group, and high-risk group are those who are vaccinated but more than 80 years old, those who are unvaccinated, more than 70 years old, the very young ones, especially babies below the age of 3 months, and those with conditions with immunocompromised states. For this group of people, their symptoms, they would belong to the high-risk group, and they would require to see the doctor. For symptoms like, if, say, for example, if you are having chest pain or shortness of breath, fever that is unrelenting for going on for more than 3 days, a headache that doesn't seem to go away with medication, palpitations, or you have symptoms that may show an impending stroke, all these are considered serious and you should see the doctor. The rest of it, most of the time, it is considered mild.
So, Doctor, for mildly symptomatic patients, they are told to recover at home. What's your advice then on what they would need to do that?
I think the most important thing is, just like as if you have any form of flu, most important is rest. Try to get good rest. Secondly, hydrate. Try to drink up more. And then the other thing, if, say, for example, you have symptoms like a runny nose, or a bit of cough, a bit of sore throat, you can get over-the-counter medication. You can get help from your uninfected household members who can buy over-the-counter medication from the pharmacy. If you're unable to do that, you are living at home alone, you can go to the portal that is given to those who are ART positive at home. You can go to the telemedicine provider and to get some medications from the telemedicine clinic, or you can call up the PHPC clinic to which you went to get yourself tested. I'm sure that the staff down there is able to help you. The other thing, I think most important, a lot of people is asking when you are at home and you're unwell and you are ART positive, is how do you exactly self-isolate? I think the most important thing is, if possible, if you are living in a household with other uninfected household members and you have a shared bathroom, try to disinfect the toilet after each use. And if you are out of your room, okay, if you are out of your room, wear your mask, okay, and practice social distancing. That is important.
Dr. Ellie, thank you for the advice and tips. Dr. Ellie Sabrina, Director and Family Physician at Banyan Clinic. In other local headlines, Ong Lin Chia, the Singapore Armed Forces captain involved in an incident when NSF was killed in a Bionics infantry fighting vehicle accident, was sentenced to 5 months jail today. The judge had earlier convicted Ong of committing a rash act that led to the death of the NSF. Before handing down the sentence, the judge noted that Ong's motivation on the day of the tragedy was to reposition the vehicle, saying this does not justify the rash decision. According to the police, the Workers' Party chairman Sylvia Lim will not be pursuing her claim made in Parliament last Friday that she'd received a threat warning from Apple informing her that her iPhone could be the subject of hacking by state-sponsored attackers. The police also say Ms. Lim didn't file a police report, nor did she require any forensic examination of her phone, and so the matter is treated as closed. Ms. Lim had met the police yesterday and told them she was satisfied with Home Affairs Minister K. Shanmugam's parliamentary response. Mr. Shanmugam had said state agencies didn't hack into Ms. Lim's iPhone and that he had done a quick check with the Defence Ministry's Security and Intelligence Division. The weekend is almost here, and if you're like me, that means it's time to indulge. Let's kick things off with a sneak peek at the next installment of Food in the Hood, a new series by the Straits Times showcasing the best eats around Singapore. Food correspondent Eunice Quek has been checking out lots and lots of eating places in the West. Her story will only be out this Sunday, but she's agreed to give us a taster of what's coming. Eunice, I am an Eastie. I always say East is the best. I hope there is something that I like in the West.
Well, I'm a Westie, so for me, West is best. And yes, I'm sure you will love Perchik's. It is a Muslim-owned stall in a Jurong West coffee shop. And it specializes in ayam perchik, which is grilled spiced chicken. So these jumbo chicken wings, they are grilled over charcoal and drenched in this delicious spicy sauce that is made with plenty of dried chilies and a good kick of lemongrass. You can get 6 chicken wings for $15, or you can go for the set meals and they come with rice and salad. Now, if the name sounds familiar, it is because they used to operate at Pasar Malam's, and this permanent location just opened in 2020. And I hear they are expanding soon, but for now, hopefully you have to come down to Jurong to try it.
Whew, well, Eunice, you got me at grilled chicken. I am convinced and I will head down. Well, thank you so much for the recommendations. Food correspondent Eunice Quek. Those are our top stories for today. For more news, visit straitstimes.com and our YouTube channel for more videos. Subscribe by hitting the red button below. I'm Harianto Diman. See you tomorrow for more stories on The Big Story.